Hey everyone, let's talk about stock stuff. We're going to look at SPY, IWM, QQQ, financial sector XLF, biotech sector XBI, and VIX. We'll do the commodities in a separate video just shortly after this later today. So on Friday, we had a gap down open for buying, and it wasn't the kind of scenario where it was an obvious gap down open for buying because we had a gap down open that was obviously further downside on Thursday, but it was the kind of scenario, and I was live streaming Friday morning saying, you know, at this point, we aren't looking bearish. We're too extended to the downside. The RSI levels on the hourly and the 4-hour time frame for SPY and IWM are getting to points where we are looking for bounces. So what that does as we're setting up for the trading days, it completely eliminates half of the equation. So if I can say to myself, okay, I do not like the risk to reward of going bearish in this scenario, I can take that completely off the table and say, I am only going to take bullish setups this morning if I see the trades and the setups that I like. So that makes things a lot more simple in terms of staying organized. And if you don't get the setups that you like, and if it were an example where we did get extremely overextended to the downside and we continued bearish, you just don't trade that day. And there's no harm and no foul and nothing lost in that situation. So we did see the bulls buy the dip, and it took a little while to get going. It was a bit of a slow morning and it felt off to me. And that is usually a scenario for me to, again, slow down trading, put the brakes on, and not be overly aggressive. But we had the low of the day, a weak bounce attempt, and then we held the low of the day by 7 cents, pretty much a double bottom, and then we changed the hourly trend. And this is the first time that we've clearly changed the hourly trend since we set the top just under 282. So this is a notable shift in momentum. I believe the video that we put out on Thursday, we said it's time to start looking for a daily bounce to take place. And the next few days are going to be very telling as to what's the most likely next scenario in this market. If this bounce only sees us go to 276 and then we top out, that's a very weak bounce that would anticipate a lower high and lower low, confirming that we are in a daily downtrend would be more likely. However, if this bounce takes us up to 278, 279, that's a different scenario. So if the bounce looks like this, weak bounce attempt, continuation more likely, and if we see a bounce attempt that takes us all the way up here, higher low would then be likely after the size of that bounce and a tightening daily range for next week. So the next 2 days of how this bounce looks are going to be very telling. And we now have a little hourly uptrend to be watching. When we lose the hourly uptrend, that's the indication that the daily lower high has been established. So anything over 272.49 at this point keeps the higher low hourly pattern intact for the bulls. But we know that when we lose that hourly pattern, that tells us the top and lower high on the daily has been set. IWM, same thing. We were very extremely overextended to the downside with extended hours on. That 4-hour RSI was in the low 20s. So just an oversold bounce is taking place at this point. We know a lower high compared to 158.78 is very likely to form on this bounce attempt. And again, it's the same thing. If we can't get up over 154, it's a very weak bounce considering the size of the dump. If we get up to 155, 156, it's a significant bounce, and the odds of a daily higher low will be higher after that. So again, it's all about interpreting every day's worth of action and determining the most likely scenario, because I have no idea how much follow through we're going to see on this bounce. But once I start to get a clue for it, once I see the volume behind it and how much follow through we get Monday and Tuesday, that's when we can determine the most likely scenario for the rest of the week. So QQQ, gap down for buying as well. Same scenario, everything that I just said. We're watching the hourly higher lows as key support, 169.68 on QQQ. For IWM, the hourly higher low, not really clearly established at this point. I guess we could call it down here at 150.81. That would be the little hourly higher low into the trend change at the end of the day. So for these three names heading into Monday, hourly higher low is the most important support level, and we have hourly resistance levels to be watching as well. 172.67 for QQQ. For IWM, we're looking up at 153.14, and for SPY, we're looking up at 276.30 as the next clear resistance level. Financial sector pulled back more than the tech sector on this pullback the last week, but bounces underway here as well. Hourly time frame changed the trend. Higher low is 25.80. Short-term resistance is 26.05. So clearly the hourly time frame is very useful in this current setup to give us a support and the next resistance levels, keeping in mind that our broader scope and focus is on the daily time frame to just determine where this lower high is going to be set. Biotech sector, definitely worth watching the biotech sector, and I'm going to start covering it in these market videos because LABD and LABU are the 3 times leveraged ETFs. U is the bull and D is the bear, and that has some great trading opportunity. And I did trade the biotech sector this previous week, I believe. I've traded it recently, and it is good for volatility. So we had the dump in the biotech sector due to the FDA commissioner stepping down, and there's a lot of uncertainty now. So when you have uncertainty, we see the market price that in. So we're looking at the bounce attempt trying to take place. It is still a daily uptrend. The higher low is still intact. And if we look at the weekly chart, we can see that we're still building this higher low pattern on the weekly and the daily. So the most important daily support is 83.53. If we get follow through on Monday and break 86.81, the high of today or the high of Friday, then we'll have a new daily higher low established, but we do need a bit more follow through on this bounce before we're confident in that. The hourly trend has not changed yet. We're building a base of support down at 85, but the bulls have to break 85.98 to change this hourly trend. 85.98 and 87.49 are the most important resistances, and we have an hourly higher low to be watching here as well at 85.56. So with all of that, we have the volatility sector pulling back and closing at the low of the day. It was a very nice bounce. We went from 1340 up to 1830. That's about a 35% bounce or so. So very significant. And now we're looking for a daily higher low to form. This bounce came right off of the low. So in order to confirm a trend change, yes, we've broken the daily lower highs, but to confirm the daily trend change, we need a higher low established compared to 1340. And then we need the continuation move over 1830. That would confirm the daily trend change, just like SPY with a lower high and lower low would confirm we are now in a daily downtrend. So that's what we're watching as we head into this coming week. The size of the bounce in these markets over Monday and Tuesday, the size of the follow through is going to be very telling as to whether or not the bulls are seeing a weekly bull flag, which is still a possibility on SPY, or, and then QQQ as well, potential weekly bull flag, or if we do see that daily lower high and lower low, the odds of a weekly equilibrium will increase. At this point, it's still very healthy pullback considering the size of the overall move that we saw. It is increasing bear volume, so again, we will be watching volume as well as a key indicator, and we'll check back in on Monday and update one day at a time with what we're seeing. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Do some good things out there in the world. We'll see you Monday. So chapter 6 of the adventure, we had headed west. We hit Boulder, and I was staying with that woman. Got the house sitting gig for a month, and I actually did trade a bit when I had that house sitting gig because I had stable internet and I had a routine and I could be more focused on it. So I was still trading penny stocks at that point. This was maybe 5-6 years ago, and I had a couple weeks until I started house sitting, so I explored Colorado. That's the kind of green you want to see. Tons of places to camp, tons of things to see. Utah and Colorado is a great chunk of land, and I haven't explored northern Utah. I wanted to. I had a road trip that was planned through northern Utah, through the northwest part of the country. I'm going to have to put that on my next to-do list later this summer. First, I'm going to be going back to Colorado in May, so I will bring my camera. All these pictures are with my phone, but I'll bring my camera, and I'm going to explore a bit more of Colorado and see some shows at the Red Rocks and have some fun. But that's for another time. So this time around, plenty of places to camp. My favorite part about Colorado is that there are rivers, so many places coming off of mountains. And so that made two things very easy. Number one, getting the fresh water and filtering it to drink. And then number two, being able to have things. You don't want to be, have a cooler and have food that needs to be kept cool when you're road tripping across the country. It's just constantly needing ice and then those plastic bags. And it's just, when you have ice cold water coming off the mountain, I would just pull over and fill up my cooler with cold water and then put stuff that needed refrigeration in it. And then, 12 hours later, 20 hours later, I can just dump that water out and refill it with other cold water. So the water in Colorado is not for swimming. You can jump in and enjoy it for a brief amount of time, but it is very cold coming off of those mountains, especially in May and June. And I believe it was June now, heading towards July. But tons of great places to camp and lots of solitude. My favorite part about getting to a place that was a couple miles into the trail and had a nice clearing like this where, it's just a lake and the forest is knowing that at about 4 or 5 p.m., no new people are going to be getting up to that spot. And that's because you can't hike up there and have enough time to get back before it's getting dark. So there's this lull time before it gets dark where everybody stops coming up. And so you have it to yourself during that dusk time when the sun's going down. This is the baby elk that I snuck up on. And again, it's just being still and very slowly moving. It's just a game of, watching animals and trying to get close to them. There were no mothers or fathers around, which was good. So there's plenty of spots like this all over, and I can't stress enough how if you go to freecampingsites.net and you look at BLM land, and BLM land is the same as National Forest land to a certain degree. It's government owned. There's very little regulation on camping in terms of where you can camp, and it's just this big public lands that we have, to take advantage of. This, I believe, is getting towards Rocky Mountain National Park, one of the spots near the entrance. These are marmots, so pretty much a giant squirrel, if I had to describe them, somewhat like a raccoon, but they would live under the rocks, and you could tell what rocks they lived under because the rim around it was all bright green and lush, and the grass, immediately after the rocks was a little bit dry and arid. And that's because of their waste. They just pop out of their hole and they go to the bathroom, and that, fertilizes all the plants that are around their rock. So you can tell where they live, and they were curious and friendly. If you pee on a rock, they really enjoy the salt and the water, and they'll run and lick it up. And their lives, they just live in areas like this where that's all they know. That's their life. They sit on their rock and they overlook the expanse. There would be times where I would be alone in a spot and I would sit there and a marmot would jump up on his rock and he'd just be observing everything with me and just hanging out in the dusk. And they get curious if you don't move. So if I sat there for an hour, he might, get used to my presence and come and check me out and see what's going on once he realizes that I'm not a threat. So that's the start of Colorado. We'll continue going westward over the Rocky Mountain National Park. Looking forward to going back there again in May, and open to any suggestions of places. I'm probably going to hit up Telluride, Steamboat Springs, and Rocky Mountain National Park, Boulder. I'm going to see Papadocio in Red Rocks. I got a buddy in that band, and Random Rab and Polish Ambassador opening up. So that should be a fun show. That'll be in a few months, and I'll be sure to bring you all along. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you over the weekend.